Well, we've heard from the government side on these proposed rule changes, so let's bring in the opposition voices now. Chris Warkentin is the Deputy House Leader for the official opposition, and Maria Rankin is the House Leader for the NDP. It's good to see you both, gentlemen.
Thanks, Peter.
Mr. Warkentin, let me start with you. The government seems to have taken a new approach now, changing its mind over the weekend on how to proceed with these proposed changes to the standing rules. So what's your reaction to how they're going about this now?
Well, really, Peter, they haven't changed a lot. What they've announced is that they're going to ram through these changes. They announced that some months ago, and now they've just put out another press release using different language, but basically assuring Canadians that they will be ramming through these changes that will make life easier for Liberals and make them less accountable to Canadians through their opposition members that are elected to the House of Commons. So it didn't come as a surprise. We knew that the Liberals were going to continue to use their majority to try to ram through these standing order changes, reduce the accountability, reduce the work that the Prime Minister is going to be doing in the House of Commons. So it didn't come as a surprise, but certainly it's a disappointment. We had hoped that they'd come with a different tone after the last little while.
Okay, Mr. Rankin, what's your reaction?
Very similar to what Chris has just told you, Peter. Disappointment, deep disappointment. We thought that we offered them an exit ramp from this mess they got themselves into. And they didn't want to go where Mr. Chrétien went by getting a deputy speaker and members of all parties to sit down, roll up their sleeves, and do the job. Instead, as Chris has correctly said, they announced today that they're going to bring in a motion, ram it through with their majority. Hey, by the way, they only had 39.5% of Canadians voting for them. But anyway, they're going to ram it through and change the way our democracy works.
Okay, so you have, the key changes they're deciding to stay with is they're, an extended once-a-week promise of the Prime Minister answering all questions to the government. He may be there more days, but that he will be there to answer all the questions in one question period. Changes around omnibus legislation, powers for the Speaker to censure MPs or take more actions against MPs who disrupt question period, and a couple of other things. But so Mr. Warken, let me start with you. How will the changes they're proposing to make hinder your ability to hold the government to account? What specific measures, if you can point to them, will make it harder for you to do your job?
Well, you've articulated them quite well. I mean, really what the Prime Minister has promised is that he only wants to show up to work one day a week. Today was a perfect example. The Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, continues to say that he'd be happy to show up more often, but it's going to be one day that he'll take all the questions. Today he broke parliamentary convention where Thomas Mulcair stood up again and again and again as a leader of a party to ask the Prime Minister questions about important issues. He refused to answer those questions time and time and time again. What we have seen is a consistent pattern by this Prime Minister and these Liberals to reduce accountability. And so what we're assured is that if in fact they're able to pass these measures, the Prime Minister will in fact only be answering questions one day a week in the House of Commons, meaning that he'll only have one opportunity.
Why do you say that? They're saying they're guaranteeing he'll be there for one day to take all the questions.
Well, then why don't they put that into writing? What they have done is said that they're going to put into writing that he's only going to show up once a week. Today was a perfect opportunity for him to demonstrate accountability and transparency and start answering some questions.
Mr. Rankin?
Yeah, like they didn't need to make those changes at all. They've demonstrated that before, where the Prime Minister stood up on a Wednesday a couple times and answered all the questions. So they don't need to do that. And the moment you put something in the rule, you know how it works, right, Peter? You're going to have a statement that he's there on Wednesday. Over time, because don't forget it's going to continue for a long, long time. Under the rules, he'll just show up on Wednesday. I know they're going to say that's not the case now, and in fact, they'll demonstrate for a few days or weeks that that's not the case, and then it'll slip into that. But look, the reason they're doing that is they're saying they're not going to let the opposition stop them from implementing something they ran on. But you know what? They've already shown.
She says you won't be given the right to veto their agenda.
Well, I can tell you that parliamentary convention, it was demonstrated by every Prime Minister pretty well since Confederation. There was always support from all parties for any changes that happened in terms of how MPs work together and how we governed ourselves in the House of Commons.
And this isn't like a budget thing, Peter, where you can properly as government say, hey, we ran on making some changes, spending money a bit different. This is about changing the rules for all parliamentarians. It's a different category of promise. And by the way, they break their promises routinely anyway. Didn't I hear about first past the post last election 2019? They unilaterally changed that one, so it's a crazy justification, and it's really shocking that's the best they can do.
All right, one of the things the government's decided to drop in these proposals is placing new limits on the time you'd be allowed to debate legislation before it would move on through the various stages. So time limits, tighter time limits on debate time. And now the minister's saying because the opposition parties won't accept those shorter times for debate. She couldn't get you to agree to that. The government will, in fact, impose time allocation more often to cut off the debate and move the agenda along. So isn't the government getting what it wants anyway?
Well, the Liberals are very good at trying to make it the opposition's fault that they can't get their job done. But I can tell you that if this government wants to advance legislation, if they want to hear from Canadians, if they want to hear the voices of Canadians, they should do that through their elected officials and allow for opposition voices to be heard. What the Liberals have consistently done is shut off debate consistently on significant numbers of pieces of legislation. And so it's not a surprise to us that they'll be bringing closure. They have done it consistently. They'll continue to do that. But what we have seen is the Liberals are now saying, well, we're not going to do the most draconian portions of these changes, and therefore we should somehow endorse and support these other changes. That's quite nonsensical. What has been demonstrated by pretty much every government since Confederation is some level of cooperation and unanimity on this. What they have in this case is every party opposing them.
Mr. Rankin?
I think that's a very good way of putting it that Chris just did. I mean, we have a tradition of working together. This place does work. And it's when the government wants to make unilateral changes on an almost unprecedented basis, what do you expect the opposition to do? We're going to stand up and fight back. But we can and will work together. Why didn't they find a way of doing that? I mean, I like some of the changes that could be made. I mean, there are important modernization reforms that we would be supportive of. So why on earth did they feel they have to jam it through? Take the question period on Wednesday, the Prime Minister's question period. They don't even need to do that. They've demonstrated it's completely unnecessary. So why are they doing this?
Well, why not? But why not put it in the standing rules? I mean, this is the way. This is what they do in Great Britain. The British Parliament has Prime Minister's questions. You can watch it here on CPAC every Wednesday. You know, it happens every Wednesday, and we air it at different times during the week here on CPAC. A lot of people point to that as the model, as the way to go.
No, nobody is saying that reforms can't be made and shouldn't be made. What we're saying is that there's a process to get there. In Great Britain, they didn't force it down the parties' throats when they initiated these things. They did it by consensus. We can do that here in Canada. It's been demonstrated as far back as Confederation, and more recently with Chrétien and the Harper governments. When changes were made, they were done in cooperation of other parties. But what we're hearing from is not only opposition benches that are saying this, we're actually having backbench Liberal members now saying the same things.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's finish on this. One presumes the government was hoping to perhaps lower the temperature by taking this different approach, dropping some of the more problematic ones, even though it's clear from talking to you that some of the proposals are still problematic, that they've said they will push ahead with and pass as a majority government. So what do you do? The idea was to lower the temperature. It sounds like it hasn't done that. It sounds like you're still prepared to fight the changes the government's proposing to push through. And what does that mean for the work of Parliament?
Well, we're going to continue to do our jobs, and that's to defend the interests of Canadians. We believe.
But does that mean doing everything you can to try and slow down their agenda, not help it move forward?
No, I can tell you what
in part because you're upset with what they're doing on these things.
Well, I'll tell you the agenda that we're not going to let them do is steamroll Canadians in terms of holding this government to account. We're going to continue to do what Canadians asked us to do, and that's hold the Liberals to account to ensure that the views of Canadians are brought to this Parliament. And if that means that it's an inconvenience for the Liberals, we apologize to the Liberals, but we're going to do what Canadians asked us to do, and that's hold this government to account.
And Peter, maybe there's still a way in which we can get the government to come to its senses and do what most other governments in the past have done and work with us to try to roll up our sleeves and do the job Canadians want. A lot of things in there that need to be improved. There are changes to the prorogation and the omnibus bills thing, frankly, are a joke. They just normalize it. They don't change anything. They don't make it better or more accountable. It just makes it, more efficient for the Liberals. And we'd love to talk to them about that, but not when we have a gun to our head.
Right.
All right. Just finish on this. When you talk about there's possible things that you could agree on, what are the significant changes to the standing rules that all three parties would agree to?
Well, we haven't even got to that yet. That's what's so unfortunate about this. Well, as Murray points out, this gun to our head. We've been given the marching orders from the Liberal government saying that this will happen. They've never given an opportunity for opposition MPs to come together in consensus and decide what are the things that we could all agree on. Those things have happened in the past. Those changes have been implemented. We have not been given an opportunity in this Parliament to do that because the Liberals brought forward what they intended us to do and to agree to before that discussion could even take place.
I'll give you an example, Peter. The omnibus bills. We think they're terrible. We've said that under Mr. Harper. We've said it to the bill we're going to start debating tomorrow. What is it? Oh, it's an omnibus bill. I mean, so we would love to fix that. But, you know, the way that they've proposed doesn't change anything. It just normalizes it. If they want to seriously change omnibus bills, for example, by giving the Speaker the opportunity to deal with this, or prorogation, giving more powers to the Speaker, we have open ears and we would love to work with them, but not with a gun to our head.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks for your time. We'll see where it all goes.
Thank you.
Take care.